When you were young, in kindergarten perhaps, you probably wanted to be an astronaut. That dream may actually be possible, seeing as space travel has improved exponentially in the past few years and will continue to improve in the future. In 2026, astronauts will return to the moon. One day, you might be able to as well. In this speech, I'll talk about what NASA is planning right now. I'll discuss how we'll colonize the moon, and finally, I'll explain why we should go there in the first place. My name is Benjamin Vargas, and I hope you enjoy my speech. Last year, the Artemis 1 mission sent the Orion spacecraft on a lunar flyby. That means it went around the moon, then returned to Earth, without landing on the moon. In 2025, the Artemis 2 mission will do the same thing, only with astronauts aboard. Finally, around September 2026, with the experience gained from the first two missions, Artemis 3 will land people on the moon for the first time since the Apollo missions. This will mark a critical step towards colonizing the moon. The astronauts from the Artemis 3 mission won't stay on the moon for long. After about a week, they'll return to Earth. The Artemis missions will continue to bring people to the moon for a long time. Creating a lunar colony is difficult. It will require lots of people, time, and money. In fact, the reason we haven't built a colony on the moon yet is because of money. Governments just don't care enough about this stuff to give the money required. And that's surprising, seeing as making a colony on the moon is relatively cheap, only about $40 billion. Building a colony will require us to solve some problems first. The first obstacle is getting the materials needed for a moon base to the moon. This is difficult because rockets are very expensive, and each one can only carry so much. This can be solved by creating very light, inflatable buildings for the founders of the moon base to live in, then making bigger structures out of lunar materials, so they don't need to be imported from Earth. The next obstacle is producing energy on the moon, since wind, fossil fuels, and water aren't viable to produce energy on the moon. The best option is nuclear energy. Nuclear reactors can be built on the moon instead of imported from Earth, and lunar soil contains nuclear fuel. The next hurdle is getting food and water to the moon. Luckily, this can be solved by building the moon base on the lunar pole, where there's ice that can be melted and purified into water. That water could also be used to water plants for food. This stops us from needing to import food and water to the moon base. After solving all of these problems, the moon base will finally begin to become an actual self-sustaining colony. But why would we want to go to the moon in the first place? Firstly, the moon is full of precious metals like gold, iron, and silicon. They are very abundant on the moon and could be mined and brought back to Earth. Furthermore, helium-3 is very common on the moon and is great nuclear fuel. It could also be brought back to Earth. In fact, many countries are already making plans to mine helium-3 for their own use. However, the absolute best reason to go to the moon is to go to other places. You see, gravity on the moon is only a sixth of Earth's. That means that you need much less fuel to take off from the moon, and so spacecraft trying to get to Venus, Mars, or the outer planets could go to the moon, refuel, and then take off from there, requiring very little fuel. Devices called mass drivers, which use maglev, the technology that makes bullet trains possible, can launch things without needing fuel at all. That means that the moon may be the key to becoming a spacefaring civilization. Going to the moon would be really cool. In this speech, I've explained NASA's plans to go to the moon, how we could construct a moon base, and why we should go to the moon in the first place. To end off the speech, I'll leave you with a fun fact. Did you know that if the moon were to start falling down to Earth, instead of crashing, it would actually get ripped apart in the air and form a set of rings around Earth like Saturn? But even though it wouldn't hit Earth, the tides, which are caused by the moon, would become extreme tsunamis as the moon approached Earth and kill almost everyone, if not everyone, on Earth. Thank you for your time. Have fun.